So tonight's presentation is all about college financing. Before we get into the agenda, just a little bit more about who MeFA is. I know many of you know who we are, but we are the not-for-profit state authority created in 1982, and really our sole mission is to help families plan, save, and pay for college. So there's a lot of ways to stay connected with us. There's a lot of ways to get information from us. Obviously, these seminars we do all throughout the Commonwealth. We do about 500 throughout the course of the year. They're condensed. A lot happen in October and September. We do about 150 just in October. So financial aid professionals kind of going out to different high schools and talking about this. But certainly check out our website, mefa.org, information. We have a blog, tools, and resources all about college planning and college financing. On your evaluation form tonight, there'll be an option to sign up for our emails. I encourage you to do that. We'll contact you and send you periodic email reminders just with some really good information so you can stay on top of everything as you're going through this process. We have a social presence as well, so check us out, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And then we do a series of webinars in the fall and spring, family webinars, where we'll talk about this topic. We did a college financing one not that long ago. We'll also do kind of a deeper dive into the FAFSA form as well as the CSS Profile, which if you don't know what that is, we'll talk about that tonight. And just a variety of topics to really help navigate you through this process. So our agenda for this evening, we're going to start by talking about the types and sources of financial aid. We'll then move into the application process itself. We'll talk a little bit about how financial aid decisions are made. Then we'll talk about paying for college, and we will end with some free resources for you to check out. I will do my best to answer every question as we go throughout. Typically how I do this is at the end of every section. I'll just pause, see what questions there are, answer those, and then at the end, if we have some time, which I assume we will, we'll answer those questions as well. I'll also be up here afterwards if you have any personal questions that you wouldn't like to bring up in front of the audience, and I'll do my best to answer those. Sound good? All right, excellent. If you do need to duck out early, I understand, but if you could fill out the evaluation, I'd really appreciate it. We do use this. In fact, we've changed this presentation many times based on direct feedback from all of you. So we want these to be valuable for you more than anything else. You know, we can change these up as to best suit your needs. So let's start by talking about the types and sources of financial aid. So defining financial aid really is just money to help students pay for college. And there's three main types. The first are grants and scholarships, sometimes referred to as gift aid. So this is the good stuff. This is what we're trying to max out on. Grants and scholarships is money that you don't need to repay. It's money that you get from the institution that you're applying to or the institution that you're enrolling in. You might get some through outside organizations. You might get some through the federal government or even the state government. Grants and scholarships are money to help you pay for school. It's money that you're not paying back. Other major type of financial aid is work study, sometimes referred to as federal work study. This is a federal work program. The way that this works is each institution gets an allotment of money, allotment of funds, and then depending on the institution that you apply to, if you qualify for federal work study, they're going to put that in your financial aid award letter. So we get this question a lot. If you're awarded financial aid, if you're awarded work study, does it come off of the bill? And it doesn't. It's just like any other job that you would have. So you'll be applying to schools, sons and daughters applying to schools. I see some students in the audience, this is good. You're applying to school, you get a couple different financial aid award letters back, and one of the items will say federal work study for $1,000. That means that you could earn up to $1,000 over the course of the year. And so again, it's not coming off the bill, you get to campus, you're either given a job or told to go find one in the gym or the library or whatever it might be, and then you can earn money and you get paid just like anything else. A lot of students will use that to cover miscellaneous expenses, but certainly you could save that money over the course of, say, fall semester and use it towards the spring bill. So that's kind of how the federal work study works. And then the last is student loans. So obviously grants and scholarships is what we want to try to maximize. The work study is pretty good, but you're working to earn it. Not necessarily a bad thing. And then student loans. So student loans are loans that you borrow. Some are in the student's name, some are in the parent's name, what we call alternative loans. But the student loan, the one that's most familiar to some of you, and you may have heard of this, is the direct loan program, and that's a loan that students can borrow each year to help cover the cost of education. We'll talk a little bit more about each of these later on. So those are the three main types of financial aid. In terms of a financial aid breakdown, this is taken from the 2016-17 College Board study. You can see kind of the breakdown, the different buckets of where student aid is coming from. Unfortunately, most of it is coming from federal student loans. About 32% of the total $180.1 billion awarded in that year comes from federal student loans. But right behind it are institutional grants and scholarships and federal grants. So it's good to see that. It's good to see that institutions that have the ability are stepping up, some more than others, to help offset those costs and offering scholarships to students. And then if you do qualify, there's federal grants as well. And you can see federal work study, it's a very small percentage, right around 1%. So we get this question a lot at MeFA, how come I'm not qualifying for federal work study and what's the deal? It's a very, very small fund, and that money keeps getting less and less that each institution is getting. So that's kind of what we're seeing just as a trend. So when it comes to kind of so we talked about the types of aid, and there's really two major categories of financial aid. And the first is merit-based aid. So merit-based aid are scholarships that students receive or are awarded in recognition of achievements in high school. As the name implies, they're based on some type of merit. These types of awards, these types of scholarships that are granted by the institution might have renewable requirements, and so you may have to maintain a 3.0 GPA. Most likely you will have to be maintaining satisfactory academic progress, which is usually above a 2.0 at a particular college, and they may not be renewable. So this is one of the questions that you're going to want to ask the colleges and universities if you are awarded a scholarship, especially merit-based scholarship, is it renewable every year? So for instance, when I was working at WPI, we would offer students who qualified a university award or a presidential scholarship, and that was considered a merit-based award. Not every school will offer these. Really, the merit-based awards are used as a recruitment tool. It's used as a way to, again, offset the cost of the institution, but it's a way to get students in. And so it's really going to depend on each institution if they even offer merit-based awards. So you're just going to want to check on them. Most colleges and universities are pretty clear on their website if they do or don't offer this. Sometimes a separate application is required, and so you're going to want to check the deadlines on this. Again, just thinking back to my days at WPI, we had a full ride scholarship that was awarded when I was working there to 10 students every year. So as you can imagine, there was an additional application to apply for that, kind of a pretty great scholarship. So in addition to the financial aid forms that you were submitting, as well as the admissions, the Common App, there was this additional form to be considered for that scholarship. So if it is a large merit-based scholarship or something pretty significant, just check with the institution to see if there is a separate application required. And because there might be a separate application, the deadline could be earlier than, let's say, the admissions deadline or even the financial aid deadline. So you're just going to want to check that out. I will say that not all merit-based awards, institutions that offer it, they don't all require a separate application. Some it's just based on you submit your application, you submit for admission, you go through the admissions process, you'll get your letter from this institution saying, congratulations, you've been accepted to our institution, and we are prepared to offer you X amount in a scholarship. And so it happens automatically. You just go through that process by the very nature of applying. So that's the deal with merit-based awarding, and again, it's based on student achievements, academic, artistic, athletic, that they achieved in high school. Most financial aid is what's going to fall under the category of need-based aid. And this is really based on the family's financial eligibility or need, and this is determined through the family completing that FAFSA form, which was available yesterday for the 1920 year. We'll talk a little bit about this. There's some hiccups that's going through the site, but for the 1920 year, the FAFSA is now available. So most financial aid, when we're talking about it kind of globally, falls under this need-based aid category. That eligibility is determined by a standardized formula. That's the formula that once you put all your income information, your asset information, a little bit about your family into that FAFSA form, it computes, and that's that formula that's utilized to determine your need-based aid. Again, it's going to include all those different types. It's going to include grants, so need-based grants, need-based loans, as well as work-study. And for need-based aid, students must be making satisfactory academic progress at the institution that they're attending. So, if you think about, and we're, kind of wrapping it up all here, there's the various types of financial aid. We're talking about grants and scholarships, federal work study, and loans. There's those two categories, merit-based and need-based, and then there's a variety of sources that you can receive financial aid from. So the first is from the federal government. Federal government has grants. The most popular grant is the Pell Grant. This is, again, is a need-based grant, so if you do qualify, this is a grant that you could receive to help offset the cost of education, work study, loans, different tax incentives as well. StudentAid.gov is a really great website. We're going to circle back to these later, but StudentAid.gov is a really great site to check out. It's through the Department of Education, and it's really clear. It's got some good information. MEFI's got some good information too, but it's a really good site to make sure that you're kind of up to date and up to speed on everything. In the state of Massachusetts, other sources of financial aid through the state, grants, scholarships, tuition waivers, and loans. The most common grant through the state of Massachusetts is called the Mass Grant, and so again, if you do qualify for that, that'd be something that you would receive upon going to the institution. mass.ed.edu/OSFA is the Massachusetts Office of Student Financial Assistance, so that's a website that you're going to want to check for more information on that. And then from the college and university, and that's what we're calling institutional aid. And so that's what you're getting in terms of grants and scholarships and even some loans. So even some institutions will have their own loan program that when they're going out and you're getting your financial aid award letter, you'll see that they might package in what's called an institutional loan or a, Truth University loan or whatever it is. I just made that, it's not a university, but you get the point. So it could be an institutional loan from the particular college or university. And then outside agencies, so this was mentioned earlier, there are scholarships available through for-profit, nonprofit, other organizations that are just giving these to students to help offset that cost of education. So we talked a little bit about this already, but the most common type of student loan is the federal direct student loan. This particular loan, the student is the sole borrower. There's no credit check required for this loan, and it does come in subsidized and unsubsidized amounts. Essentially, the difference between that is if you have a subsidized loan, a subsidized direct loan, the interest that accrues while the student is enrolled, you're not responsible for repaying. The unsubsidized loan, the interest starts accruing immediately, and you're responsible for repaying that, plus the principal balance of the loan. There are annual limits, so for first-year students, the total limit is $5,500 in the federal direct loan program, and depending on your need and eligibility and the cost of the institution, which we'll get into in a little bit, kind of how that all breaks down, it will be split between a subsidized portion and an unsubsidized portion. The interest rate for the 18-19 year is out there now. Now it's a 5.05 fixed interest rate. And just to give you an idea of what repayment would look like, so if you just borrowed what you were eligible to borrow, the student just borrowed what they were eligible to borrow in the direct loan program, it's $5,500 for first year, $6,500 for sophomore year, $7,500 for junior and senior year. If you borrow that, it'd be $27,000 in debt, plus any accrued interest, but just generally $27,000. So you'd be looking at approximately a $300 per month repayment for 10 years upon graduation. So I think that's just some good numbers, something good to see. If you were just borrowing those direct loans, that's what you would be looking at in terms of repayment when it came to that time. Okay, so questions about the first section before we get, yes, sir?
Are tax implications in this order?
Say that again?
Tax implications of all these grants. Is this the right form for those calculations?
Yeah, so tax implications in terms of,
So these are basically work studies, right?
yes.
Is that tax?
So you're taxed like any other, yep, it's work that you're, yes, that's,
And how about the grant? Whether it is the merit scholarship or any other grant, is that taxable?
no, no.
And in one of the breakdowns, I saw federal tax credits. What is that?
Yep, so that's listed as part of just financial aid, kind of like globally speaking. But the American Opportunity and the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit are the two tax credits that you could claim potentially on your tax returns. Yep, so those are the two there.
And how about the private loans I have here as well? Here, it does loans from Discover, financial institutions, as well as citizens. What's the difference between those and these or state?
State loans, yeah.
Beyond the interest rates.
Yeah. So the question was about kind of alternative loans outside of basically what we're covering right now. Yep, so there are alternative loans. So basically when you are going through the process and you find that, okay, you're getting all the kind of financial aid from the institutions, grants, scholarships, whatever you can cover out of pocket. If you do need to borrow additional funds outside of what's eligible to you or available to you, there are private student loan options that you can borrow from. And so those are both, they come in a variety of flavors. Some are student-only loans, and they might require a cosigner, most of the time they do. Some are parent loans. There's also the Parent Plus loan, which is another federal loan that's available to parents to borrow. And so yeah, there's a lot of different loans that you could borrow on top of basically what I just covered there. We start with those because those are kind of the big ones, those are the basic ones. But yeah, absolutely, there's a lot of additional places to borrow from different lenders with different rates. Absolutely. Good question. Yeah.
It's a need that you mentioned that most of these scholarships or grants are need-based. So how much income is like too much income, or is the need determined based on your tuition at that particular university?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You know, how much income is too much to basically kick you out of eligibility is essentially what you're saying. So it's really going to depend on the institution, and you'll see a little bit later kind of how that all comes into play because the cost of attendance is so different from university to university. But the expected family contribution, which is that number that's determined when you complete the FAFSA, is the same. So we like to say the EFC travels with you, right? It doesn't matter if you apply. If you're community college, state school, private institution, your EFC is the same, but the cost is obviously much different. So your need is going to be higher, in theory, at a more expensive school. And so kind of saying, you know, what's the level that kicks me out is, it's impossible to answer only because your eligibility is going to be different from institution to institution. So that's why we encourage families to complete that FAFSA, to complete that CSS profile, just to see if you would qualify for any financial aid. But it is, you know, to your point, to your larger point, it is certainly possible that you would complete that and you would not be eligible at all. But we really don't know until you complete the form. Yeah. Did you see this before? That's perfect. No, that's great. So we encourage folks to, you know, certainly complete as soon as possible. The earlier the better, just I think for everyone's sanity. It's kind of interesting because you're doing these processes simultaneously, right? You're applying to institutions, so you're focused now on the admissions process, right? Maybe doing EA, maybe ED, EA1, EA2. At the same time, you're going through the financial aid process as well. And so institutions will list when their deadline is for their financial aid stuff, for the financial aid forms. Stuff is not a great word. For their financial aid forms. But in terms of kind of when is the best time to get it in, we say just as soon as possible, as soon as you can. Something that's relatively new in the past few years is that when you're going in, you're completing that FAFSA, so you're doing it for the 19-20 year, you're actually using prior year income information. So you're using 2017 income information. So that actually makes it a little bit easier because what used to happen in the past was you would complete the 19-20 FAFSA in 2008. You'd be using 2018 information. And you'd be like, well, I just did my tax or I haven't done it yet. So forget that, that doesn't happen anymore. But essentially you have 2 years prior to do it. So the short answer to your question is as soon as possible, as soon as you can, but institutions will have their own deadline. In terms of the state deadline to be considered for any state financial aid in Massachusetts, it's May 1st. But we encourage you not to wait until then, because May 1st is also the deadline that most colleges and universities have to say yes or no, you want to come. So definitely yes?
Question about what you just said. So what if your income changes a lot between the Title 17?
Yeah, so great question. So kind of an unintended consequence is that it made it easier in theory because, and you know what, I'm gonna skip ahead to that. Can I answer that in 1 second? Okay, so we talked about deadlines here. We have a really great college application manager form that you go in and kind of keep track, and it's a nice way. I'm sure you all have your own spreadsheets and you're kind of using your own thing, but it's something that you want to do. But as I mentioned, you try to get those applications in as quickly as possible, but each institution will have their own deadline listed there. So before I get to your question, I just want to talk a little bit about the FAFSA form. So again, this is the free application, federal student aid. The first word is free. It's underlined and in bold here because it's very important. It's free, you should not be paying for it. Go out, if you're paying for it, you're on the wrong site. FAFSA.gov or FAFSA.ed.gov will actually bring you there as well. This is the form that's required by all colleges. New this year is that FAFSA can now be completed on the Student Aid mobile app. So I have the app as well. I would encourage you to download it. Your sons and daughters may have downloaded it already. I'm just opening it right now. But basically it's an app that you can go through and actually complete your FAFSA on the phone. And so you can switch seamlessly between filling it out on the phone and filling it out on the desktop. It's not kind of an app in the traditional sense that it's separate from the website. They do communicate with one another. So that's new this year, so if that's something that you want to research or take advantage of, certainly go ahead and do that. In order to log into the FAFSA, you will need what's called an FSA ID. And if you don't have one, both you and your student will need an FSA ID. This is how you're going to log into the FAFSA. This is also how you're going to sign the FAFSA if you're doing it electronically, which most of you will sign electronically. There is an option to print and submit that way, but most will do it electronically. For a lot of you, you will be able to utilize what's called the IRS data retrieval tool. So when you're in the FAFSA form, when you're completing it and you get to the section where you're reporting parental income, you'll have an option to say, yes, I want to transfer my 2017 tax return data into the appropriate fields on the FAFSA form. And so as long as your tax return is filed and completed, then you can actually pull that information right into your FAFSA form. So it's a nice advantage to do. You don't have to go through all the questions on the FAFSA if you're able to do that. You'll still have to answer some. It doesn't transfer all of the information, but just another opportunity. If your son or daughter filed a tax return, they can take advantage of this as well. As I mentioned, we do have a good amount of webinars as well, so if you want a real deep dive into the FAFSA, including kind of a step-by-step what the screens look like, and a little bit more on the specific questions, we have that recording available now on MeFA.org, so you can go and check that out as well. Some riveting material, as I'm sure you can imagine. But if you do want to kind of go through and check that out, I encourage you to do so. So this is kind of to your question, what's reported on the FAFSA form. So student citizenship status, the colleges where the student is applying, up to a maximum of 10. If you're applying to more than 10, do the first 10, submit the FAFSA. You'll get in 3 to 5 days what's called a student aid report, or SAR. Once you get that, that's kind of your confirmation that this information has been processed and sent to the schools. Log back in, remove some of them, and add in however many colleges more. So if you're applying to 15 schools, you can only put 10 on the FAFSA in the first shot. Submit those, wait for the confirmation, log back in, delete 5, and enter the 5 new schools. So that's kind of, we get that question a lot because there is only a maximum of 10. In terms of the parents that should be reported or who is considered a parent on the FAFSA, so it's going to be parents who are married, including same-sex parents, all parents who live together, married or not, and then if there is a divorce or separation, it's going to be the custodial parent and the current spouse. The custodial parent is determined by the parent that the student lived with more over the past 12 months. If that's an equal split, then the custodial parent is the parent that the student received more financial support over the past 12 months. If that's split down the middle, then you choose one. So that is who the custodial parent will be and the current spouse. So to your question, parent and student income is reported on the FAFSA. For the 1920 year, you're going to be reporting 2017 income tax data. So we do get this question a lot. You know, things have changed significantly since 2017. My situation is different. We encourage you to still report the 2017 data, still go through that process, but then contact the financial aid office. So that would be an appeal, one of those special circumstances to say, look, you know, my 2017 data says this, but this is really what's going on in the family situation from an income standpoint. So it's kind of the guidance. Again, unintended consequence, it's nice because the information is all processed, so you can move it right over. But what's happened in 2017 might not necessarily be reflective of what happened in 2018. So you'll just contact the financial aid office and let them know. In terms of some assets that need to be reported, parent and student assets, so include values of savings, checking, investments, and other property. So although the income information is from prior year, 2 prior years ago, 2017, any asset information, investment information is going to be current as of the time that you're completing the FAFSA form. So that's current information. You don't need to look back on your records, your bank accounts in 2017 at that time. So that's going to be current. Yes, sir?
Do you need to include all kids 529 or just the one student that you're applying for?
That's a great question. So yes, you do need to report the value of all students' 529s in the households. Yeah, and that's going to be reported under parental asset because in 99% of the cases, you're the owner of the account, the student is the beneficiary. So it's reported as a parental asset for all students.
Is there a place for liabilities?
In terms of, I think I need a little more information on that.
Like earning mandated payments? Like alimony or something like that?
Sure, so alimony is, so I have my handy form right here. So this is, if you really want some really good reading, this is called the Application Verification Guide. And so this kind of goes through step by step every question that you could have on the FAFSA form. So alimony payments, I believe, are reported. I don't know specifically where they are reported, but let me do some digging on that, and if we could connect after, absolutely. And anything that I can't answer right now in terms of kind of going through, there's this really, really good form that we have here, so we can kind of dig into that a little bit. But yeah, it's the form itself actually has some pretty good direction as you're going through, just to say kind of report this, don't report this. But in terms of kind of the big things that folks get tripped up on, a lot of people will include the primary value of their home. Do not include that. Do not include the primary value of your home when on the investment or asset side. Do not include the value of retirement. Do not include the value of life insurance or the value of a small family business that's under 100 employees. Yes?
Value of retirement, that means if you're retired, you don't count your retirement as income?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry, sir.
Does that mean if you are retired, you do not count your retirement as income?
So any retirement payments that you're receiving, you will have to report.
Yeah.
If you're receiving it, if they were received in 2017 year, as either part of regular reported on the 2017 tax return or as untaxed income, but any value of the retirement account as of that day, you will not have to report.
Okay, how about child support?
Yep. So child support received, you will report on the FAFSA. You'll also report any child support paid out of the household if that particular situation arises. Yes. Yeah, so most schools will not ask for that. It's a, you know, when you're going through, you're completing the FAFSA form, some other financial aid forms, it says, you know, what is the value of all of these as of today? And so some colleges might ask for proof of that, especially if there's an appeal situation. So once if you're getting to a point where you're appealing your financial aid, or you go through and you kind of have those award letters and you're saying, look, I want a second look at this, I want to see there's, you know, I reported this on my 2017, you know, my income information says this, but here's really what's going on in the household in terms of cash flow. They might ask for verification of that, but 9 times out of 10 they won't. Yep. Yeah, so it's the day of, and it's pretty clear when you're in the form, it says, as of today, what are the values of all these accounts? Yes.
Yeah, we have one student in college and one applying to college. Do we do a FAFSA for both of them?
It's a great question. So if you have one student in college and you have one applying, absolutely, you would do 2. So each student will have their own FSA ID, because again, they're the ones that's kind of their signature, but you will use the same FSA ID for each. And what's nice is once you complete the FAFSA for one student, there's actually a prompt to say, do you have another student going to college in the 1920 year? Do you want to complete the FAFSA now?
Do we keep the same ID then as parents?
Yes, yeah, the ID travels with you, the ID travels with the particular student, but each student will need one.
If you forget your ID,
Yeah.
it's terrible. Can you call or?
Yeah, this
I find ID like the hardest thing in the world, I swear to God.
yeah, I know, it's somewhat cumbersome. Yeah,
It's just so crazy.
yeah, there is a way to actually go back and to get that information. You could also reset it, I believe, and so there's an opportunity to get that. I know, it's something that, with every password that we have, and it's just one more thing to. Yeah. Yeah, I believe there's a time limit on how long until then you might have to enter in. And so I don't know for sure on that, but I remember there was something about it may be timing out, or if you try too many times with the wrong one. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Did you set your own ID or they set it for you?
I believe that they set it for you. Yeah, you go and apply for an FSA ID. If it's fsaid.ed.gov is the place to go. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. No, you do for any children. So for the 2000, you're not going to go back. So it would be, yep, so for the upcoming year, it's going to be the 1920 academic year. So when you go out, and the site's been a little wonky because it just went live October 1st, which was yesterday. So you'll go out and you'll say, start a new FAFSA, and it's going to be for the 1920 year. Yeah, it'll be the year that the student is, assuming that most of you in the audience have students who are seniors, and so they're planning to go in the 1920 year. Oh. You wouldn't have to do it now. No, yeah, you wouldn't have to do it now. There is something that you could go out, it's called the FAFSA Forecaster. So you could put in your information, you kind of get an idea of what it might look like. But yeah, so yours would be for the 2021 year, essentially. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna keep moving on just because I want to be cognizant of time. But again, I'll be up here for any questions, and we'll kind of circle back. So in addition to the fact, did I answer your question up there? I'm sorry, about the 2017 and kind of rechanging. Okay. So the other major form out there is called the CSS Profile. I know some of you have heard of this. This is used by a lot of private colleges and universities. And unlike the FAFSA form, which is, has become a little bit, I don't want to say simpler, but there's definitely been less and less questions over the years. The CSS Profile is a little bit more in depth, and so individual colleges and universities, again, mainly private colleges and universities, may choose to utilize this additional form. It's put forth by the College Board, or it's administered by the College Board. There is a fee associated with this form, so it's $25 for the first school and $16 for each additional form. Like the FAFSA, it does become available October 1st, and so CSSprofile.org is the place that you're going to want to go. Unlike the FAFSA form, which is just looking at that custodial family, the CSS profile is looking at the biological family. And so if there is a divorce or separation situation, both the custodial parent and the non-custodial parent will have to submit the CSS profile. We have a really great webinar on a deep dive into the CSS profile as well. Much like the FAFSA one, you can get a bit into the weeds, but I would, if that's something that you're interested in, definitely take a look at that. If you're wondering which schools require the CSS profile, hopefully the college or university that you're applying to has it listed on their site that says, in addition to the FAFSA form, we require the CSS profile. If you go to cssprofile.org, they should also have a listing as well of the colleges and universities that that require the form. And so kind of what happens after you apply is that the colleges and state receive the data electronically. So you go in, you complete the FAFSA form, you get to the end, you sign submit, you send out to all those institutions. You're going to do the same with the CSS profile. With the FAFSA form, the students will receive what we call a student aid report, or SAR, by mail or email, hopefully if they're entering in an email. Contact that financial aid office with any special circumstances. So again, if something has changed drastically from 2017, or if something has changed, you submit the FAFSA form now, October 2nd, October 3rd, and come January 2nd, February 2nd, something has changed, contact that financial aid office to let them know, hey, here's what's going on, it's a little bit different, my income information said this, or my information said this, but it's changed since I submitted that. Colleges may request what's called verification documents, and this is basically just a document that says, a process that essentially verifies what information you put on the FAFSA form is indeed accurate. And so you might have to submit a tax return, you might have to submit a tax transcript, but this is really up to the discretion of the financial aid office, or in some cases you might be chosen for federal verification, just to go through that process. And then the colleges review the applications and determine your financial aid award. And this is happening, as I mentioned earlier, kind of simultaneously along with the admissions process. So you're going through you're applying to colleges, you're getting the financial aid, you're getting those acceptance back, you're gathering your list, you're going through all this, you're saying, yep, this is the institution I'm going to, or this is the institution I'm considering, and then at the same time, in a separate process, you're getting a financial aid award letter from the financial aid office. And so that's kind of, happening simultaneously, and you're looking at that, and you're able to kind of delineate and kind of put all that information down and say, okay, here's what each individual institution is willing to offer. All right. Questions? We have a little bit of time. Yes, sorry.
When is the deadline? When does it have to be completed?
When is the absolute deadline for the FAFSA form? Yep, so for state financial aid, it is May 1st. That's the absolute deadline. But each individual institution kind of has their own deadline. Most, it's February 1st.
Right.
But again, with that prior year information, and if it's something that you just want to kind of get off the checklist, I would encourage you to do it as soon as possible. And if it's your first time doing the FAFSA form, it can be kind of a bit overwhelming, a bit daunting. We get the FSA ID, we get a lot of moving pieces. But I think, hopefully, for folks who have done it maybe once or twice or 3 times, or maybe this is your second or third or fourth kid, it's becoming somewhat more intuitive, and it's becoming somewhat easier to complete that form and to go back in and make any corrections on an as-needed basis. The CSS profile, unfortunately, is a little bit more. It's a little bit more in depth. There's a little bit more information that you're going to have to gather, but I would encourage you to do it as soon as possible.
If you're applying for action, and they're going to make that decision and send back acceptance and a package with that. So if you're doing early action, you might have this done.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great point. Yeah, if you're doing EA1 or EA2, I know a couple institutions kind of break that up. Yeah, absolutely. And so, what is nice, again, is that you're using kind of that prior information. And again, the awards will be estimated. They're always going to be estimated until either verification happens or it's kind of signed off by the financial aid office. But yeah, absolutely. Especially for folks doing EA. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you could put 10 schools on. If you're doing some early action and some regular decisions, you just put them all on at the same time?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Or regular application won't go out for a while?
Yep. And so what happens is all the schools will get the information, the data just kind of sits. And then when it comes time to awarding or to reviewing, really. And so we would, at WPI, basically, we would be looking at just stacks and stacks and kind of seeing, if it's time, students accepted, kind of we're going through that process and we're continually reviewing. And so if you're not applying till regular, but the information is in the database in October, that's totally fine.
If you're applying early action versus regular decision,
Mm-hmm.
does more money get allocated for the beginning? Is it like first come, first served pattern, or is it,
Yeah, it's it really depends on the particular institution. Some may have and they're awarding strategies and parameters. Some might have more funds dedicated to an early action applicant pool. Others might have just an irregular applicant pool. It's really going to be on the particular institution. But in terms of qualifying for any federal student aid or state student aid, then that's something that's not going to depend on the institutional, whether you do EA or a regular decision. But some institutions kind of, again, that comes more down to their awarding strategies. And that raises a good point. That's really when it comes down to that institutional money. So any money that's coming from the endowment that they're saying, okay, we're going to offer a merit-based scholarship, or we have a set amount of money that's going to the applicant pool for this year, and we know that we want to try to bring a class in, want to try to really push our EAs, then a little bit more money might go towards that. But it's kind of impossible to answer because it's different from each institution. But if you're after the deadline, then definitely that could impact it. Yeah.
Once your student is enrolled in year one, do you have to renegotiate this every year? Do you do the FAFSA every year?
Yeah, so you do have to do the FAFSA every year. Most schools will do what's called level funding. And so the amount of money that you're getting for the first year is going to stay consistent each year, as long as the student makes satisfactory academic progress and kind of goes through all that. The only case where you might see a change in that is if from year one to year two there was a huge spike in income. And so now, because of that, it's maybe kicked you out of eligibility for need-based aid. So the FAFSA form you do have to do every year. The CSS Profile, most schools only require for that first year, before the first year. Yeah?
So if someone gets like merit-based scholarship, or they have other scholarships they get, how does that work financially? Like, does it include the need-based, does it take it away?
Yeah, so this is a great transition. So that's a good transition. So I'm gonna keep going here, and hopefully I can answer that. Yeah.
Is there, I read somewhere, so is there a good time in spring to go back to financial aid office after people have said, no, I don't want to come here, and then there's money allocated, but it's not distributed? Is there a sweet spot there to go back to financial aid office?
So we typically advise families to go back to the financial aid office if there is a change in the financial circumstances. Working and talking to our colleagues in the financial aid offices and on institutions, that's kind of the guidance that they've been giving to us. For most institutions, there might be a set amount of institutional funds that they're looking to award. If they don't award all of those, even if there's some left over in the pool, it's probably going towards other expenses or maybe back into the endowment. So there's not necessarily a sweet spot, but if there is a change, certainly, a lot of appeals will happen in the aid office in the kind of the March, April time frame. And so, if something does happen, that's when I would go back out. All right, so I want to keep moving here, and these are excellent questions, so thank you. So the how financial aid decisions are made, and I think we're going to get to your question here a little bit, hopefully. But it really starts with that cost of attendance, and this comes back to someone's question earlier about, do I even qualify, or what does it kick me out of, and how much is too much? How much income is too much? So it really all starts with this cost of attendance. So this is the kind of the top number here. And included in the cost of attendance are tuition and fees plus room and board. So these are what we call billed or direct expenses. When you get the bill, you're going to see these on the bill divided in half, right? So you'll have half of tuition and fees, half of room and board on the fall bill, the other half on the spring bill. So these are direct expenses or billed expenses. Non-billed or indirect expenses that are also included in this cost of attendance, this kind of top number, are books and supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. And there might be some other categories here, but these are kind of the bigger categories. So the reason these are non-billed or indirect expenses, you're not going to get a bill for transportation. That's not how it's worked. But it's built into the cost of attendance so that students can hopefully be awarded financial aid up to this, hopefully in grants and scholarships, but if you needed to borrow additional funds in alternative loans, as we mentioned earlier, you can borrow up to this cost of attendance. That's kind of why they built it in. It's really, the cost of attendance, just think of it, any cost that you could incur for 1 year of college. And then subtracted from that expected family, that cost of attendance is that expected family contribution. So this is the amount of money that the family has the ability to absorb for 1 year of college costs. We could debate absorb, but we won't because that is not tonight's forum. But so this is the expected family contribution, and this is the number. It's a number, it's an actual figure that is computed once you put all of your information into the FAFSA form. So you'll put your information into the FAFSA form, student information, and at the very last screen, it's going to say what your expected family contribution is. So family has a primary responsibility for paying this expected family contribution. And very, very important, it's not necessarily what the family will pay. And in many cases, unfortunately, it's not what the family will pay. I'll just mention this slide here. This should be after the slide. But if you're looking for kind of what type of financial aid you may receive from the institution, each institution has what's called a net price calculator. And so this is available right on the institution site. You can go in, kind of plug in some numbers. Some are a little more intricate than others. And what it does is it displays basically historical data, historical averages based on the information that you put in of what students received in financial aid. So if you want an idea or want a way to kind of go through and see what you might qualify for, you can check this out. The tool itself is only as valuable as how much information it's asked for, and so schools are actually required to have a net price calculator. It's a federal requirement. Some put a lot of information in there, and there's a lot of behind the scenes calculations. Others will not, and so the less information that's asked for, the less accurate it is. Unfortunately, you can't get your printout of I did this net price calculator and it said I'm going to get $25,000 in scholarship, and then you only get 12, and you go to the office and say, look, it's unfortunately not how it works. It's just a tool to kind of give you an idea of what you could qualify for. So, when it comes to that financial aid formula, really it starts with that cost of attendance, you subtract that expected family contribution, and then what's left is your financial aid eligibility. And this is where colleges fill in financial aid eligibility with financial aid from all different sources. So again, this is where those grants and scholarships, those need-based grants and scholarships are going to go in. This is where the loan will be packaged in. This is where the federal work study will go in. Any federal grants will go in, is in this financial aid eligibility, or in this financial need. So I want to just skip, I'll go back to those slides, but I want to kind of go to this slide because I think it's really, really important, and it fits well off of the formula that we just talked about. So how the formula works, and this gets to a question earlier, because that cost of attendance is going to be different at every institution. If you're looking at a private not-for-profit versus state institution versus community college, it's going to be very different costs of attendance. So because that top number is very, very different, and because the expected family contribution is the same as your expected family contribution, it travels with you, you can see that the eligibility will look very, very different from institution A, B, C, and D. So that's why you're going to see such varying financial aid award packages. You're going to see such a variation in the types of financial aid that your son or daughter is offered. One of the major drivers is because the cost of attendance is just so different from each particular institution. And I have a slide later on this that shows even if the cost of attendance is the same at an institution, let's say 2 institutions both cost $50,000 a year, and that expected contribution is $10,000. So again, it's $40,000. It's the same at each. The types of financial aid is just going to be very different from institution to institution. So this is our barrel slide. Some people hate it, others love it. I think it's a good representation. So I'm on the light camp. But basically what it does is it kind of visualizes how this financial aid is packaged or stacked up. So college here that we're talking about, the cost of attendance is $45,000. That expected family contribution is $5,000, so that goes right in the bottom of the barrel. It kind of sits there. So your need in this particular situation is $40,000. So on top of that, the student is packaged both scholarships and grants, $9,500 and $55,500. Okay, grants and scholarships, that's good stuff. Those are most likely need-based grants and scholarships. It's fitting right into that need. And so it's good money, something you don't have to pay back. On top of that, it's going to be a student loan, have to pay that back, but there's that $5,500 amount, which is the maximum in the federal direct loan for a first-year student. On top of that is work study, so $2,000. Again, this isn't coming off the bill, so you can't rely on this to come off of the bill, but once the student gets to campus, they could work and earn up to this. And then right on top is what's called unmet need. And unfortunately, a lot of institutions do not, what we say, meet full need. And so if this was an institution that met full need, maybe heard that term, there would be no unmet need. There would be scholarships up to that amount. But most institutions do not meet full need. And so what you end up happening is your cost is really that expected family contribution plus that unmet need in one particular year, and then of course the loan as well, which is a future cost that you need to repay. So it's kind of a wonky process, and there's some variability in not only the cost of attendance, but also the totals at each institution. So in this particular scenario, same cost of attendance, same EFC, the total eligibility is $40,000. You can see that the College A is clearly a better deal when it comes to grants and scholarships and what the particular institution is offering versus College B and even College C. So again, same eligibility at particular institutions, but the type of financial aid or the total very, very different here. And in a similar vein, the type can vary widely as well. So in this particular example, we're saying that the cost of attendance is $45,000, expected family contribution is $5,000. So again, each college you have that same eligibility, but College A, B, and C, the type of financial aid offered, very, very different, right? Clearly College A is going out and offering the most in grants and scholarships, $27,500, whereas College C is not really offering any. So you can cross that one off the list. So that's kind of here. So obviously, all of you know this, but comparison, very, very important, kind of getting that, putting that in the spreadsheet that you have, looking at not only what am I getting in financial aid, but also what are those types, and then also not necessarily eliminating an institution because of the cost. It's really all about what that net price is. So don't, the sticker price can sometimes be scary, in the 60 and 70,000 range for some private institutions now, but they might come back with a really, really great financial aid package, and a lot of it could be grants and scholarships. So again, it comes down to what's that net price after you factor in all the financial aid. Yes. So this is the maximum amount of the federal direct loan. So in the first year it's $5,500, sophomore year $65,000 goes up. So this is just in that one loan program. So if you needed to borrow more to kind of cover these costs, the gentleman was asking about kind of private and alternative loans. So this is where you would research any private or alternative loans to cover that balance. Or paying out of pocket. Or, as was mentioned earlier, what institutions will do, any outside grants and scholarships, most institutions, they're going to pop that right on top. And so they're going to say that you received $2,500 in outside scholarships from X and Y organization. That's going to help defray the cost, so let's put that towards your college bill. Yes?
So,
Oh, one more, sorry.
so, parent loan and student loan, are they coming from the same institution or school?
So the, in this particular example, the student loan is, the lender is the Department of Education, federal government. Now for the parent loan that we have packaged in here, there is a parent loan that's offered through the federal government called the Parent Plus loan. Some institutions will actually pre-package a plus loan in your financial aid award letter. You still would have to go out and apply for that loan and borrow it. It would be, yeah, it would be an application just for the loan.
That's after the fact or?
Yes, after the fact, yep. Once you choose the particular institution that you're gonna go to and you decide, all right, you know, I've got between grants and scholarships and what I can pay out of pocket and everything else and outside scholarships, I know that I need to borrow an additional $10,000 per year. You could go out, get either a private loan or a plus loan in this particular case for that amount to cover the balance. But yeah, that's gonna be a separate process from there. Yeah, so that would be on the parent. Yeah, it's a parent, the plus loan, parent loan for undergraduate students. So that's just the parent loan. Now there are some alternative loans that are technically considered student loans, but because a lot of students don't have equity in their name and a lot of credit, then most of the time they're going to require a cosigner, and so that a lot of times is the parent. So it's the message, and this is to students as well, especially minimizing the amount that you're borrowing in those alternative loans, if at all possible, right? And maximizing kind of what you're getting in grants and scholarships and what you're able to pay out of pocket. A lot of institutions offer payment plans as well, and so you're not coming up with a kind of lump sum fall and spring, you're just doing a monthly payment that kind of breaks those costs up over the course of the year. Yes, they do offer fixed rate loans, the Parent Plus loan. Yeah. So it's based on the it's a credit loan. It's a credit based loan, credit check loan. Oh, was it? Oh yeah. Oh, sorry, in the back. Yeah.
If this is like, you know, if you go and apply for a mortgage,
Yeah.
they tell you you can afford $1 million house.
Sure.
Except you have to put furniture in it and
Right.
pay for your college, right? So
Yeah.
it's not realistic. Is this process like the EFC? Is that if you go back to the EFC of, I don't know, $50,000 or $60,000 that you supposedly magically pay, are you just, you know, disqualified or, you know, like you don't qualify for loans, but would they still, is it likely they would consider merit or, I mean, it's.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So the merit. Right. No, that's a phenomenal question. So I would say that if the expected family contribution comes back pretty high, and you're like, well, even for schools that cost a lot, there's not a lot of wiggle room. If you do apply for, or you are applying at an institution that has merit-based awards available, that's something that could be considered or would be considered for the student. Again, those aren't merit-based awards, are not looking at the need of the family, it's based on the merit of the student. I know a lot of outside scholarships are need-based scholarships, but not all are, and so kind of exploring that route there as well. And you know, if you believe and you go through that FAFSA form and you're putting that income information in, and you're saying to yourself, wow, this just isn't really an accurate representation of my family and our cash flow and what we have available to pay, you know, I would say that if you truly believe that and you're going through that and you're saying this just isn't accurate and this doesn't accurately reflect us, the institution that you're applying to, I would go ahead and submit an appeal or look at that. I know I wish I had better news. You know, I think for some of us as we go through and you know, there's unfortunately not as much wiggle room as we would hope in the process. Yeah. So the student loan is technically considered just a piece of financial aid simply because it's a loan that any student can get regardless of their past credit, so it kind of fits into that bubble. Correct. Yeah, so if whatever particular institution that the student ends up enrolling in, there's a process that you'll go to actually accept the federal student loan, the direct loan here, and say yes, you'll sign a promissory note, go through some entrance counseling, absolutely. You know, kind of why it's considered a piece of financial aid in general, and it really comes down to just that the option that the student can borrow really with no kind of past credit in their name, and really just as the very fact of being a student and enrolled, you can get this. I would say that in terms of kind of repayment on this loan, you're not responsible for repaying while you are enrolled as a student, and there are some various income-driven repayment plans, so there is some benefit to borrowing a loan. But I mean, if you want my honest opinion, it's not great, right? It's not great that a loan is something that we're heavily leaning on for financial aid. I guess the silver lining is, or the good news is that there is a cap to it, which can be, I guess, both good and bad. But, you know, something we talk about with families a lot is it really does come down to saying, okay, let's lay all these out, let's get our top 5 institutions, and let's ask ourselves, you know, what is the most financially feasible option for us? And, I mean, I have a 2.5-year-old, so college is probably gonna be like $1 million when he goes, so I get it, and I understand, and it's kind of painful to think about. But I would say that it really comes down to kind of making sure you're doing a broad list, making sure that you're looking at all different types of institutions, and hopefully you can find one that's really going to be offering a great value to you in terms of grants and scholarships, and so you wouldn't have to worry about those. I know that doesn't really answer your question, and I know that's not you know, ideal, but. All right, so we are over our hour, but you're all sticking with me, so that's great. So I appreciate it. You just don't want to go out in the rain. So I have a final few slides here, and then I'll take any other questions, and then, like I said, I'll be hanging out up here for any other questions that you have, any personal questions. So, you know, we talk about paying for college, just an example of what it might look like, and this was asked a little bit or alluded to, kind of what are you borrowing, what do you do to cover the cost of that balance. So let's say there's a balance due of $20,000, you know, just looking at, are there some student savings and summer earnings, any parent savings, parent contribution to a payment plan. So a lot of institutions will offer a payment plan, so instead of having to pay whatever that bill is divided by 2, you just pay over the course of 8 or 9 months. So it's a little bit less to absorb on a monthly amount. And then if you do need to borrow a private education loan, this is where we advise, typically at the end, make that last piece that you are borrowing there. Just some additional financial considerations, and I would hear this a lot, we kind of continue to see this. You know, just thinking about the number of children you'll be sending to college, thinking in terms of total enrollment. It's 4+, it's 4 years at least, potentially 4+ years, and that total debt. You know, my friends in the admissions office are very good at recruiting. It's their job. Apologies to anyone who works in college admissions, but don't really talk about financial fit and finances a ton, although it's coming up more and more, so I think it's good. But there's a lot of, it's just not talked about as much as it should be, in my own opinion. So, you know, thinking in terms of that total enrollment, that 4+ years and what that means for total debt. You know, we showed you earlier, if you just borrowed the student loan, 55, 65, 75, 75, it would be about $27,000 in total debt just for the student. But if you're taking out additional loans, or if you're taking out, you know, a parent loan, or if you're taking out another private student loan, what that looks like. You know, is the student considering graduate school? And so is there maybe researching or looking at potentially lower cost options at the undergraduate level, because if they are looking at that graduate school, they might have to be borrowing there as well. And then I'll leave you with before we get to the free resources, there is a great program in the state of Massachusetts called Mass Transfer, and so if this is an option or something that you as a family might want to consider, the state has made it pretty seamless, a very kind of intuitive process to transfer from community colleges to state school, or even state school to private institutions. And so Master Transfer has a list of kind of the three major programs: the Gen Ed Foundation, the A to B degree, and the A to B in the Commonwealth Commitment. It is an option out there, kind of starting in a lower cost institution and looking at that transfer option into a potentially more costly institution. So again, kind of cutting those costs in half. And then free resources, so financial aid office, learn about your financial aid office. They're good people. Maybe not as friendly as the admissions folks or out there as much, but they're really good people. They're my colleagues, I love them. So just kind of get out there and talk with them, say hi, go say hi. It's a good thing, they're good people, they're there to help. They want to be able to do everything that they can within what they're allowed to do, from both a federal standpoint and institutional standpoint. Asking about those special considerations, which we've talked about a few times, finding out additional details from the particular institution, and then making sure that you're using every avenue of the office. So the financial aid office website, in-person meeting, phone call, email, reaching out to them. Your sons and daughters will be assigned a financial aid counselor. Most institutions break it down by that, just based on your last name, who their financial aid counselor is. So just being in contact with them. And if you are talking to financial aid officers, go with your sons and daughters, have them speak. That's good. I know finances can be somewhat of a tricky topic, so if you do feel comfortable, have them speak. Some really good resources locally and as well as nationally. So FAFSA Day, FAFSAday.org. These run October through February, all throughout the state. So you can actually go and have someone, myself or some other folks in financial aid, walk you through completing a FAFSA. So you can go in, you bring your information, you log in, you actually go through the process. So definitely look at FAFSAday.org. You can look for kind of the local one that's near you. Educational Opportunity Center is another resource that you could take advantage of. And then mention scholarships, but I know Naviance has a really good scholarship search engine as well. We do have various regional, so we do these college financing seminars all throughout the state. As I mentioned, we also have after the college acceptance webinars. And it's a little bit more about the financial aid awards, the college bill, different payment plans, and college loans. And we'll talk a little bit about what to ask that financial aid office. So these are locations across Mass. Again, not at every high school, but regional locations. So if you look on our site, we'll list those there. I'll ask you once again to please fill out the evaluations. We do definitely use those to make these better, so I encourage you to do that. And then also, if you wouldn't mind, if you want to receive the emails with some really good information about what you should know at certain times, as well as just information about our upcoming webinars, we'll share that through email as well. My name is Jonathan. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you coming here tonight. Good luck with the process, and thank you.